So welcome to the Advice Academy Against the Odds podcast. How are you and how's the season been?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been an interesting season. It was pretty competitive right at the start. We had like a couple of really close losses to like the top four teams. We haven't made top four, so we're not in the playoffs. But for me, I got injured like February time, so I haven't actually played since then. So it's just been rehab for me since then, really.
And who have you been involved with this season?
So I trained with England 15s in the autumns, just got called into camp because of an injury, and then got selected for England 7s for a couple of World Series tournaments, so that was pretty cool.
How was that then?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was my first experience of 7s at that level, and I didn't really expect to go at all, so it was a bit of a whirlwind really when I got called in to play. But yeah, it was incredible. It was a great experience, and I loved being around the girls. Miss it a little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
So what tournament was that? Seville?
Yeah, so we went to Malaga and then Seville the following week.
Wow. So loads of travel?
Yeah, came back with a bronze medal as well.
Really?
Yeah.
And what position were you playing in 7s?
So I played prop, not the fast prop.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved it. Loved being in the scrum, loved being in the line out. Not so much in 15s, I won't be signing up for that.
And what's been a big lesson for you this year?
I think that just you can, like, for me personally, to aim high, because things that have happened this year for me haven't necessarily ever been on my radar or things that I would think would be possible. So I think that it's always really important to like strive for things that you think are unachievable, because you never know what might happen.
So have you purposely aimed really big this year, or is that something that you've learned because of this year?
Yeah, that's something that I've kind of thought about since then, because I never really expected to go into the 7s, and when I got the phone call, like, do you want to come into 7s camp? I was like, well, I'll come and give it a go, but I don't think I'll be any good at it. And then obviously ended up going and playing, so I think that's just taught me that you need to like reach further than what you think you're capable of and always aim for something bigger.
So coming into September, what were your goals for the season?
My goals for the season were to get invited into 15s camp.
Right, which you did quite early on then.
Which I did in the autumns, yeah. And then that was it really. That's been like my biggest thing. I also wanted to get selected for the Six Nations, which I was supposed to be in the squad and then got injured. So I guess I kind of reached my goals a little bit, but it would have been nice to play. But yeah.
But it was always next year, eh?
Yeah.
Did you struggle this year, a bit of injury?
A little bit, yeah. So I tore my hammy January time, and then but like kind of played through it, didn't really realise that it was that bad, and then re-tore it again. They kind of scanned it and realised that it actually was quite a risky one, so if I'd have played on, like, I probably would have needed an op eventually, so probably for the best to like tailor it back and just like focus on a lot of rehab stuff. So yeah, that has been like a bit of a challenge for me this season, like missing out on things, like missing out on the end of the season kind of thing. But yeah, it's been alright. I'm nearly back.
And how do you find being involved in a full-time environment? I
love it. I think it's interesting because some people like they can't have downtime and they really struggle to like chill out.
Yeah.
But I don't find that difficult at all. So like I can do my training and I find it like pretty easy to get my training done and then like relax and recover. Whereas a lot of people they say to me like, oh, do you not get bored? And I'm like, no, I don't get bored. There's things I can do. So
what do you do then outside of rugby?
Not a lot. I very much like just to chill out. I've got into reading the past couple of years. And I've got a goal this year to read 22 books in 2022. So, and I'm already 13 in, so I think I'll do it.
So is that like one every 2 weeks?
Well, it depends really. Like if I've got a lot going on, I maybe read one in a month. But then like April, for example, I was just rehabbing and not much else. So I think I read about 4 or 5 books in April. Yeah.
And what kind of books do you go for?
It varies really. I like biographies, autobiographies. But also I just love like, have you heard of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins?
Yeah, I know.
That's one of my favourite books. And then like all the Ant Middleton books, things like that.
So quite self-development.
Yeah.
And what else do you do to escape rugby? Is it friends, family?
Yeah, pretty much. Food,
Coffee shops?
coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the usual. Nothing too bizarre.
And switching that on its head then, when you're not rehabbing, what would you do to like get ahead? So how would you outwork your competition?
I think it's all pretty similar. Like in terms of rehab, you're wanting to do like extras just to make sure that you're on top of like the other things that you're not rehabbing at that time.
Yeah.
And I think it's all like kind of on the same continuum. So if like you've got a little niggle, just like staying on top of things like that, staying on top of your skills. So like even now when I haven't been able to do like rugby sessions, I've been like trying to stay on top of like all my little basic skills and stuff to make sure that I can just like stay on top of things and stay on top of my game for when I'm back like actually in the session. And I think things like that, like they should never go away, whether you're in like full-time training or rehabbing, anything in between, because that's what has always worked for me, just like making sure I get my basics done and like the non-negotiables really.
Right, okay. And has that always been the case, even when you were younger?
No, I wouldn't say so. Well, I think a lot of things you do when you're a kid, they go unnoticed, don't they? Like you have a kick about for hours on end and you don't really think about it as like extras. Me and my brother used to spend hours like out in the street outside our house, like kicking the ball around, passing the ball around, doing like one-on-ones, things like that. And I think things like that, like I've always done, but I didn't really ever consider that I was doing extras or I was doing.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because like if you're enjoying it, you don't really notice it. And I think it's still similar to that now. Like if I go out and I'm like passing the ball around with the girls, I don't really think about the fact that I'm like doing extras, but it all adds up and like it all benefits you.
So when you were a bit younger, was your brother a big help in terms of, you know, getting out there?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think given the choice, I probably would have just sat and watched TV, but he was like, "Oh, should we go outside?" And I'd always obviously go along because didn't want to miss out. I think like the neighbours weren't a massive fan because the ball would be always hitting their cars and their windows, but
Yeah,
I think yeah, but I think like in the long run it has really helped, and he's always like kind of been a driver of that, just because he was really keen to, so I think that's massively benefited me.
And has rugby always been the dream?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's interesting because like similar to what I was saying before, like I never really aimed that high. When I was a kid, I was the same. Like I wouldn't have ever said like, "Oh, I want to play for England," because in case I didn't do it, and then you're a failure then. Well, you're obviously not. But I think that was like my biggest downfall. Like people would say, "What do you want to do when you're older?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know," because like I didn't want to aim for something that I didn't think was realistic.
Yeah.
So like I always wanted to play rugby, and I always wanted to play to a high level, but I never really thought about like how high that could be.
Right. Okay. And what would you tell a younger self?
Just to work really hard, and like anything is really possible if you try your best.
So would you have, if you say you could go back, would you be telling yourself aim real high, England Sevens? You would.
Yeah, 100%.
And tell me about your journey then, from 10, 12, whenever it kicked on. Yeah,
so I started playing when I was about 10. Played like a little bit of tag rugby in school, like didn't really take it serious or anything as you do, but my brother started playing, and then I used to go down and watch him. As the classic story, watching your older brother and then you feel a bit left out, and then so I started playing then when I was like under 12's age with the boys,
because it's mixed at that age, isn't it?
Yeah, and there was me and one other girl who actually plays here now as well, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, we played together. And then obviously after we couldn't play with the boys, we had to find a girls team. So we tried to get one ourselves. Ended up having to travel a lot, like travel to Leeds, travel to like
bigger cities.
Yeah, just to like get a team together and play against other teams. And then when I was 16, I came here to college.
And why was that? Why did you decide Harvard College?
It was a very not last minute, but I never really thought about it all the way through year 11 until like towards the end, and then I was like, oh, I could go to this place and just play rugby. Yeah. And like obviously school's important and all that, but at the time, like when you just love rugby and you just love playing sport, you get the opportunity to train pretty much full time, and you're like you can't say no to something like that. So I came here, and I think that was like the massive turning point for me, when I realised like, oh, I could actually do well if I take this seriously. so yeah, like that was massive for me. But then in my first year of college, got into England under-20s. At 17, but then ruptured my ACL, so then didn't end up ever playing for them.
So tell us about the ACL then.
So I just did it here, playing again. Well, it was similar to, you can never get people that have enough players or whatever, and a team came to play against us and they needed a couple of extra numbers, so I had to play for the other team. Two of our best back row smashed me, did my ACL. They felt bad about it, I think, but it's okay. And
how tough was that at the time?
Oh, it was terrible. I think, it was hard because I didn't really know what to expect. I hadn't ever been injured until that point, and I think there was a few kind of months in and around that where I was like, oh, am I capable of doing this? Am I ever going to play again? What you don't really know when you've never been in that. Yeah, and then you're kind of like, oh, what am I going to have to do to actually play? And it's hard, especially when you're here and all your friends are training full time and you're just kind of sitting on the sideline, sitting on a chair passing a ball, which at the time doesn't seem interesting at all. At the moment now, I'd probably love that, but yeah. So eventually, came back a year and a half later. Had quite a lot of issues with it, so didn't really end up playing that much for college after that. Then went away to uni, went to Cardiff Met.
So why Cardiff Met then?
Just for the course, really.
Right, what was that?
Conditioning, rehab and massage. And because I'd done BTEC here and I really enjoyed the anatomy side of it and the rehab side of it, so I was like, I'll go away and do something in uni that I'm actually interested in. So went to Cardiff Met and turned out they were pretty good at rugby too, so it suited me quite well. Played in uni, loved it, had a great time in books and stuff. And then right before my third year, did my ACL again. So that was probably the hardest one. It was harder than the first one in terms of I knew what I'd done and I knew what I had to do to get there, but I was like, oh, I know this is going to be a slog. I know it's going to be difficult.
And how did you deal with that?
I don't really remember. I think because it was my third year, I had a lot more going on. I was writing my dis, I was doing my exams and stuff, so I just had to really focus on that. And then my rehab was a big thing, but I managed to fit it around everything and just prioritise everything else. And I was like, oh, I'll get my rehab done, but I've got a dis to write, so that's more important. I've got a deadline. So I think that was good because it kind of took my mind off things, and that was a bit easier to deal with in terms of that, because I knew what to expect, I knew what I had to do, even in terms of little exercises that I was like, oh, I remember doing this last time, so I'll do it again. Came back from that one after 7 months.
That's quick.
Yeah, real quick.
And how did you manage to do that so quickly then?
I just smashed the basics at the start, getting full extension, getting full flexion, things like that. Because they're the kind of things that take such a long time, and then once you get it done, you can kind of progress really fast. So once I got those and I got them real quick, I was like, oh, okay, I can move on now. And then my physio there was really good and helped me a lot in terms of how I can progress and what kind of things I can do to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward. So yeah, somehow managed to get back. My first game back was a sevens tournament though, for Welsh unis or something. And it was savage because obviously I hadn't played, I hadn't trained, hadn't really done much, and I came back probably a bit chubby, and then I was playing sevens against all these quick girls. I was like, whoa, I need to do some pre-season or something. But yeah, very much so. But yeah, it was good to be back. It was great. And then the following summer, then I'd finished uni, graduated, and then I came back here to play.
And did you sign a contract with Cross Hartbury?
Yeah, and I've been here ever since. So then I was here. We had back then an A team and a B team, or something. But I was always in the second team, my first year here, which we had international centres and it was a lot. There was a lot of competition, so I was so okay with it, and I was like, I'll just get back into actually playing well and enjoying it. And then when I eventually got the opportunity to play, for the firsts, and like I loved it and it was so good.
Who was that? Was that your debut?
Well, I had played come off the bench a few times, but I wasn't like a regular starter.
Right.
And then when I eventually would start for the team, I was like, okay, I'm back now. I've been injured, I've done this, and kind of tried to come back and enjoy it, and now I'm going to take it seriously again, actually put a lot of effort in. Because I think when you're playing at that level and you're training with the girls, if you're kind of on the fringes, it's easy to just be a bit of a coaster.
Yeah,
and I think that's probably what I did. And then started getting selected a bit more, and I was like, okay, I actually need to eat better, train harder, and then the following year, so 2018, I got my first cap for England, and then got contracted 2019, so was full time for 8 months. Did my ACL. Yeah. So basically, every time something gets a little bit good, I'll get injured, but not anymore.
Touch wood.
Yep. So then did that, and then because obviously I'm not going to play for a year, I wasn't recontracted because my contract ran out then, which completely makes sense. But then I just went from having everything, I was full time, had my dream job, just played rugby, it was great, and then was playing for England, and then I didn't have a job, wasn't playing rugby. It was terrible. There was a summer tour, and I was supposed to go on that. It was to San Diego, and there was 5 days before we flew. That's when I got injured. So that was the worst thing ever to happen to me, probably. It was horrible, because you just kind of have all these goals and you have these aspirations of what you want to do, and then you're oh wow, I actually don't have any of that. What am I going to do now? So it was tough, but I'm really lucky that I had a really good support network. My friends were great, and I was probably a horrible person to be around. I was probably awful, but it was good because they were so supportive, and everybody here was so great in terms of getting my rehab done and stuff. Then did all my rehab, worked really hard, probably the hardest I've ever worked, I think. And then it got to I was 4 weeks out from playing, and then we went into lockdown and they cancelled the league, and I was right, so I'm not playing rugby still. So it was tough. I think there was days when I was I'm just gonna lock myself in my room and not speak to anybody because this is terrible. But yeah, now I'm back and playing. I'm on the right track, I guess. So
which one of them tough times would you say was the hardest part of your career?
My third ACL was the hardest, because then I was getting where I wanted to be, and everything else it was I'd done something good, and then I was I've got injured. But this one was I had everything that I could have wanted, and it seemed too good to be true, and then I got injured, and I was how am I ever going to get through this? And then I'm now I need to get a job and try and work out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to pay my rent, and then it was really hard, but here we are.
And what was there? Can you put your finger on something that you did that got you through it, or was there a distraction? Was there a certain family or friend that got you through it?
I think I'd say my friends were incredible. They would pretty much babysit me, be oh, we're going to take you here for the day, or we're going to do this, and just they were so supportive, and I kind of I probably took it for granted at the time because you don't really consider that, but then now looking back, I'm I don't know where I would have been without the people around me, because I was in such a hole about the fact that I couldn't play, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But yeah, they got me to here now, and we're good.
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
And if you were to give a piece of advice to your younger self, or to a young player out there, what would you give?
I think just hard work and confidence is so crucial. Just because even when I've been playing, or even when I've been injured and at my lowest, I've always put 100% into my rehab or into my training or whatever. And then you've got to be confident that what you're doing is the right thing. So there's a reason that you're getting better and getting stronger, and it's because you're working really hard. So you need to have the confidence that you're doing all the right stuff and that you're going to get where you want to be if you keep doing that.
So confidence comes from action.
Yeah.
And did you ever imagine you'd be where you are now?
No, not at all. I think like maybe a couple of years ago I was like, oh, I want to be a full-time rugby player. And then obviously that happened and it was amazing. But then after I got injured, I was like, oh, I probably won't be full-time ever again. Like, I don't know why, but you know, you just get into a bit of a thought process that you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do it now. Like, this has happened and am I ever gonna get back into it? But then after I came back from sevens, I got offered a full-time contract with 15s again. And obviously it's been like a bit of a difficult one because I've been injured with my hamstring, but it's just like a short term. So now I'm in the position where I'm full time. I can like smash my rehab, and then the goals are to like get back stronger, fitter, faster.
Ready for pre-season.
Ready for pre-season, yeah.
Talk to me about your England debut.
It was all very much a whirlwind, that one, because I remember I got a phone call like say on the Friday saying, oh, we're wondering if you wanted to come to camp on the Monday. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And so then I was at work at the time, so I was like, oh, can I have Monday off? And they were like, why? I said, oh, we're going to go to England camp. So I went to this camp, and there was like 40 of us there. So I was thinking like, oh, I'm just like, there's loads of us, so like I'll be all right. I'll just like kind of fade into the background, like do my best, but like there's not too much pressure. Got through that camp, and then they announced the squad for the autumns, and I was in it, and I was like, oh, that's funny. Like, I didn't expect that at all. But I thought, oh, I won't play. I'll probably be like maybe on the bench. I'll probably maybe be a reserve or something. And then the first game of the series, then I started against USA.
How was that?
Yeah, it was incredible. Well, the weather was awful. Like, it was the worst torrential rain I've ever seen. And we were at Saracens ground, so it's quite open, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It was windy, it was wet, it was awful. But there was like 4 or 5 of us getting our first caps there, so it was like a pretty big occasion. Katie Daly McLean was getting 100th at the same time. So like it was a real big occasion, but the game itself was like pretty scrappy because it was just so wet and horrible. And but I think we put like 50 odd points on USA, so like a pretty great game. After the game though, we were obviously like soaking wet, and I got called to do like the anti-doping. So like off I went to do that, and then like nearly missed like the cap ceremony and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was all
crazy.
It was all a bit like crazy. And at the end of the day, I was just like, I'm just exhausted. I need to go to bed.
And the rest of the autumns, how did that go?
Yeah, pretty good. So then we had 3 games that year. So I didn't play Canada, and then played against Ireland at Twickenham then, which was obviously pretty cool. And then we won that one as well. And yeah, it was real good. And then obviously then it came around to like January time, and that's when they were handing out contracts for like not the first time ever, but the first time to be like permanent kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I got a contract, and I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that at all. But I think that was really interesting because it's like you go from, there's a lot of girls that were in the England squad and like have trained as though they're full time all this time. But for me, I trained like Tuesday, Thursday with club, or like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday with club. And those other girls, they're like pretty much training full time, like pretty used to it, pretty like physically they were like at their best. And I went in and I was like, wow, like I've got a lot to do to like actually be at the level that I should be at. So it's quite eye-opening really. And I think it's interesting because like obviously in men's rugby, like you go through an academy, you go to like your professional club, and you are a professional rugby player, and then you get called into England, you're already at your peak. Mm-hmm. You're already like physically you're like ready to go. Whereas for me, I was like, I'm not, I've got so far to go before I feel like I'm physically capable of like doing what everybody else is doing here. So that was an interesting one. But
and how did you bridge that gap then?
I just had to work really hard, and I think that was the case for like quite a few people. But yeah, it's just about hard work really, and then like making sure you're like following the program to a T. And I'm quite particular, so like if it says like do this, this and this, I'll do it like that, and I can't like stray away. I can't. I'm weird. But yeah, just like hard work, and that was it really.
Just ticking boxes on the fine details.
Yeah.
And what's on the horizon for future?
Well, there's a World Cup in September. So my goal is to go to that. I really want to go to that. I don't know like how likely that is at the moment. Obviously being injured and haven't really played since like January, February time. But yeah, like my ultimate goal is to go to a World Cup and to win one. So hopefully everything goes to plan and that can happen. But if not, there's always one in 3 years' time or 4 years' time.
So you've got rehab for the next, how long?
So I've got another 2 weeks of rehab, then we go into off season, so I'll just like, you know, like keep ticking over, and then pre-season starts July.
2 months of hard graft?
Yes.
And then the league starts in September?
Well, the league, it starts a little bit later this year because of the World Cup. Okay. So most teams will be there. So then we've got cup games at the start, and then league starts officially like November time, I think.
Wow. Well, all the best for the World Cup.
Thank you.
All happy days.